Welcome to the PHP Ottawa Meetup. Today I'm going to do a small presentation about Swoole. It's actually just a small example of how I built a small web app using Swoole without any web server, without Node.js, and with real-time features. The reason of mentioning nginx and Apache is because it's not very common to see a PHP stack without those, right? And also, when we talk about real time, it's not very usual to see someone doing that without Node.js. So, who am I? I'm Savio, and I'm a PHP developer for a little more than 13 years now, and I'm always trying new stuff. And Swoole is one of those things that I tried a while ago, and I think is going to be big in the PHP world. And I would like to share here so people get more aware of this tool. Everywhere I mention Swoole, people usually say that, oh, I don't know it, I never heard about it. So, well, here am I sharing. So everybody who watches this at some point will be aware now. So the scope of the presentation is basically this. What is Swoole? Advantages of using Swoole, some benchmarks to impress you, and an example web. So let's start. What is Swoole? Swoole is a coroutine-based async PHP programming framework. That means that Swoole is actually a PHP extension, so you have to install in your server and activate it to be able to use, just like MySQL extension, for example. If you have a WordPress website, for example, and you are configuring by yourself your server, you have to activate MySQL extension, for example. And I was preparing a web server myself today, and I started a web server on DigitalOcean, and it didn't come with MySQL installed, like the extension. So when I started the application in PHP, like when I tried to connect, it threw an error. That was really weird. It has been many years since I didn't have to install the MySQL extension. So because of that, like because it's becoming very common that applications are using more and more other like alternative extensions, I think it's not going to be a big issue by having to install a new one when it comes to having to install one extension in your server to use Swoole. Even because Swoole offers so many advantages that it's kind of is not even a trade-off in my opinion. It's not something that you lose something. So a coroutine means that Swoole is actually allowing PHP to use multiple processes in your server to do multitask. So when you're running a WordPress request, for example, in your server, when you open the first page of your website, what is going to happen is that WordPress is going to make a bunch of requests to the database. It's going to probably, depending on how you configure your website, it's going to make external calls to other services. For example, if the user is logging with Google, for example, probably you're going to make a request to Google to get some information. If you are using the Facebook marketing tools to monitor who's accessing, to have more market information, to know your audience. Your website is going to bring some stuff from Facebook also, probably. So you have a lot of connections, things happening in sequence, depending on how you configure your application. And that is going to cause some loading time. So let's suppose that your application is doing that in 3 seconds. If you're using multitask, like Swoole offers, you can delegate some of the more expensive processes to other processes in the server, so the server can do something else while that process is happening. Because the normal way that PHP does things is that it goes in sequence. So once one process starts, it waits for that process to finish before it does something else. So with Swoole, you can do things and you don't have to wait for the previous step to finish before you start the next one. Of course, it's going to change a little bit your architecture, but yeah, that's still an advantage in my opinion. You can still use synchronous process. It's just an option right now. So, and it also makes available for you to create socket servers. So you can make WebSocket connections, which are the connections used for real-time features. So web chats, for example, Facebook chat is a chat that uses a socket connection as an example. Other socket connections, we can see, let me think about something. I don't know if GitHub used that, don't quote me on that, but probably. One thing that I noticed before is when you make a commit and push some change to a repository that you work, if you have a page, if you have your repository open in your browser, you will notice that it pops up some message saying, oh, you have this new branch with a new code. Do you want to create a PR? So, and that happens before even if you don't refresh your page. So I believe that is a real-time feature. Don't quote me on that, but this is what real-time stuff does. You're kind of, uh, the server knows where the client is, so the client doesn't have to keep asking for new information. The server sends to this client, so it becomes faster, the communication, and it less expensive to the server, because the server won't have to handle a bunch of HTTP requests in order to serve data, and it only serves the data when there's actually new information. So there is a big advantage there. And it's not just that. Like I can keep going here. It's, for example, IoT, Internet of Things. So like smart home, for example, devices. Swoole also make available that type of connection. So you can have a server that communicates with your devices at home using PHP Swoole. So yeah, it can go on. And it has a Apache license, so you can use for commercial purposes. That's a big thing. So let's see the advantages here. I think I already mentioned them, let's go through the list. You can build web applications with a web server, big thing there. I have to mention that Swoole is not unique on that. There is another project called PHP React that also does that. And I was checking their website a few days ago. They are very confident that actually they are very I don't know how to word it, but they say that it's production ready, so they are a big competitor on that matter with Swoole. Also, they do real-time server too, so Swoole is not alone there, but it might have some advantages using Swoole, because Swoole is a coroutine framework, so, and PHP React is not. So, and here will be a big advantage for Swoole when it comes to a comparison between Swoole and PHP React. The increased performance based on the coroutines. So there is another advantage which is the better usage of server resources, and that happens because of something that I'm going to show. Yeah, right here. The way Swoole works, I know that some other web servers might do something similar, but they're not as efficient as Swoole is. And I'm going to show some benchmarks for that. The way Swoole works is that when you start a web server using Swoole, every new connection is not going to compete with each other. So for example, don't quote me on that. I'm not very sure if that is completely true, but if I'm not wrong, when you make a new connection, for example, to nginx is going to use different workers for each new connection, but they are going to compete when it comes to the PHP, because some servers, they use the PHP FPM, and they still use a single process for that. So even though they are fast in the web server side, they get slow on the PHP side. So here comes an advantage of PHP Swoole, if that is reality, which is, I'm saying that if that is reality, because I read something about that. I searched when I was preparing this presentation, something more explanation about that. I couldn't find. So feel free if you know something, more information about that, to interrupt me here. But and if not, here's an advantage of Swoole, because Swoole is on the PHP level, and it distributes the connection with other workers. So they are not competing with each other. So you can have more workers doing the job and serving results while new connections are coming. So they are not competing, and they can do way more. And not just that, actually, I won't dive too much here. You can search more information here, actually. So let's move forward, because I'm afraid that I might get too much into the weeds here. So let's move forward. The benchmark is actually the first step here. The first benchmark here is an application using Lumen. Actually, both are Lumen, the same Lumen app. You can see more in this URL here, where they did this benchmark. I did some of my own, and I found even bigger differences than this. But I decided to use someone else's benchmark, so because I might have forgotten something. So we have here nginx with PHP stack for the Lumen application, and Lumen is a micro framework of Laravel, so it's already very fast. And because it's smaller, right? And this is the intention of being smaller. So with that stack, they could do 80 requests per second. So using Swoole for the same application, they could do 8,717 requests per second. So this is a huge difference. So I believe that if I couldn't convince you until this moment that Swoole is something like that can make the difference in your application, I think this is when I think I'm going to convince you, because the difference is huge, right? Like if you have a website, they used to have a saying on Yahoo Office many years ago. I heard when I was in the university that I don't remember actually how many hundreds of clients you would lose for each load second of your website. So if you want to gain performance, this is the way, I think, if you're using PHP. And I can say also that there is an alternative to use Swoole for WordPress, actually, because you can run Swoole like that. For example, if we go on the Swoole website here, you'll see how the website, how the server starts. So this is the website. You can go here and see, for example, this is how we start a web server, like an HTTP web server, right? It looks like nodejs, right? So you might ask, like, how I'm going to serve my WordPress application this way? It might not be possible, right? So you don't need to serve this way. You can serve using Swoole as a CGI parser, just like any other web server. So you can have your usual PHP in one side and you can have Swoole in the other side, and then Swoole serves PHP just like any other web server, and you can just point the folder the directory where WordPress is, and it's going to work just like any other web server. So to know more about that, I can serve a URL after, but they have a project. Let me see if I'm wrong, if I can find it very fast here. They have, this is the Swoole page on GitHub, and they have many projects. This is their source code in C, because it's a PHP extension. And then they have like other, I think this is here, if I'm not wrong. And they have an example where they serve WordPress. CGI, let's search for CGI. No, it might not be this one. If I'm not wrong, they put like just like that. Yeah, fast CGI. Here it is. So they have proxy WordPress example. So this is how you would serve, for example, WordPress using Swoole. And this could enhance the performance of your website right away. So yeah, if you want to enhance the performance somehow, Swoole becomes an option now. So let's move forward with the example app that I bring for you today. So I prepared here a web app. I'm using Slim Framework. So Slim Framework is this here. It's a micro framework built in PHP that I liked a lot, particularly. And it's very simple. Any extra feature you have to install by yourself, but they already have some kind of suggestions for you. For example, if you want middleware, you can use right out of the box. But if you want some access control layers, there are some projects that you can use. You can bring decoupled extensions or components from other frameworks. For example, Symfony, you can use them all. All the packages that Symfony offers, you can use on Slim. So I like it a lot. And the biggest advantage that I found for this presentation for using Slim is that Slim 3, to be more precise, has a small library called a Chico Slim Swoole. So let's go there, which is this right here. And this library here is a small library to be a bridge between Swoole HTTP server and Slim. That is necessary because Slim expects the request to be in a standard PHP global variable. And when you're working with Swoole, it's not going to be the same as working with any other web server. You won't have the same globals available in the same way. So to be able to use that, you have to kind of study and read a little bit more about how Swoole does that for you and how to bridge those global variables into your application. If you want to use Swoole in like serving the web server within your application, you can also do that fast CGI alternative that is going to work just like the same as any other web server. But if you want to use like the high level performance Swoole server, this is the way. So they build like this bridge manager here that actually bridges the connection with Slim Framework. So I can use Slim Framework right out of the box, Swoole. So, and this is the index of PHP of my application. So I have monolog to log everything I need, the dependencies for the application container here, and the templates here. So I can have some templates. I'm building this as a skeleton to be some kind of like the skeleton of any microservice that I might need in my projects in the future. So I decided to build this. And here it is. Swoole works in the command lines environment. So to start a web application, a web server with Swoole, you go on command line and start and run a PHP code. So because of that, I'm listening to argv here. The argv is the global variable that you have every time you run something in the command line with your PHP. So actually, I'm listening here for the first parameter. So if you have more parameters, it's going to fail. But just for the purpose of this presentation, I'm listening like this. So here I have the two servers right away. So the way I start the first server is just PHP index.php. And the way I serve the other server, I open another command line and it serves like PHP index.php dash dash WebSocket. And then I will have both servers. They are both running from the same code, but they will be available through different ports, to different protocols, to different purposes, but using the same code. And the way, for example, let's see the HTTP server here. The HTTP server is just using that bridge application that I just shared with you, which is this one. So I've just copied this code here and it works just fine. So let's see, HTTP server, and here it is. I just copied the code. I'm listening to the port 8282. I can make this more dynamic by having a configuration file that is not actually in the repository, but just for the purpose of this presentation, I left a lot of hard-coded stuff here. And yeah, that's it. This is bridging the Swoole into my HTTP expected requests format. So if I wanted to use with this application that I built here, with nginx, for example, a normal web server out there, I could just do this. Because the way Slim works is that it just runs the app for every request that comes in. So this would make this skeleton application here to work with any other web server. But if I want to work with Swoole, I made this available here for the HTTP server, and this is going to work just fine. So the WebSocket server, it just works the same as any other WebSocket. I don't know if you have experience with WebSockets, but if you work with Node.js for any other WebSocket purpose, you're going to find the same strategy here, the same way of, of doing things here. It's just based on events. So, and this is how the entire Swoole works, is event-based. So if you want to communicate, for example, between processes, you're going to use events too. So just saying that for reference. So you have, for example, you start the server, and then every time, like when you start, this is the start event, you can do something, write something in the command line. When someone opens a connection, you can also do something else. When you receive a new message, you do something. When the connection is closed, you do something. And the way I did things here is that, just for the purpose of this presentation, again, when someone connects, I'm not actually serving the entire data through the HTTP connection. I'm serving through the socket connection, just to see how it works. And I've been able to send like very fast everything. So I'm just sending a message to everybody who's connected. So I can get all the connections here. So if I have like 30 clients connected to the same server, I will send to everybody. And every time someone else, some client sends a message in, I also distribute that message to everybody. So this is how it works. So actually, just one more detail here to share is the front end. I'm using a library called Alpine.js just because I wanted something very light and fast and simple to use for this purpose. And I use Alpine.js also because I I'm not a fan of React or Angular in the way they keep the state of the application, like using Redux. I think that's more complicated than it has to be. I'm not alone in that opinion, actually. Even the creator of Redux tweeted about that a few years ago, how complex it became. And I prefer to use the native JavaScript events. And this is what Alpine.js does. So if you want to communicate between components, you can just dispatch an event. It will listen, it will update the data right there. You don't need to care any further. So I'm just using the WebSocket object on JavaScript. It's the native JavaScript object for WebSocket connections here. And I'm connecting to our server created with Swoole. And I'm watching for its events right here. And I'm doing something. For example, when someone connects, I'm sending that entire list of to-do lists, for example, because this application is for a to-do list. So I'm sending an array in a JSON format. So here I check if it's an array, to do loaded, and I do something. I dispatch the event to do loaded. If it's not an array, I just dispatch something else. Because I kept it very simple just for the purpose of this presentation. Of course, this is not how it would look like if I have all the rest of the procedures, like the delete, the update, the simple read. They would be different here. So just for the purpose. So I'm dispatching two different events here depending on the message we are receiving. And then I watch in the Alpine.js for those events. And I'm doing something else. For example, I replace the entire to-do list if I receive the array, and I just push a new item if I receive the add item event. So let's see how it works. I'm going to start the web server here, the HTTP web server, just like this. And now I have the web server running. And now I'm going to start the WebSocket server. So like this. And now I have the WebSocket server. So I have those two servers running based on the same code right now. And I can open this in the browser. So let's just shrink this so I can have another window in the side. Right here. And oh, it's not 8080, it's 8282. And I can have the other right here. By the way, I'm not using MySQL here. I'm just persisting in the file system here, just to keep it very simple. So as soon as I add an item here, you'll see the item popping up here. So item one, oh, I wrote it wrong. Yeah, but that's it. It's right here. And the same thing in the other side. So it's all working. And I'm also writing in the command line. So I'm doing an echo in the backend server, just like this, for every new message coming, just like this. And this is what you're seeing here. So the item one, the item two. This is the format of the message that I'm sending. It's just a string in a JSON format. So yeah, that's the application. This is how it works. It's very fast, actually. And you can just imagine everything that you can do with it, right? One thing that came out of my mind like this afternoon is that, for example, I work in an application where users, they have to refresh to actually see the new state of the application. And sometimes, for example, they are uploading videos that are 300 megabytes. And when they're uploading that big video, sometimes we do other procedures in the backend. So, for example, after they finish that upload, we are going to also parse the video in the backend to do some stream processing. We are going to upload a copy of that video to another server, which is going to be actually the final server where the video is going to stay. And we are going to upload that video to YouTube to also be available on YouTube when the client wants that. So that process is asynchronous. It goes after the upload. It's not immediate. So sometimes the user is not aware of when the video is already available on YouTube. So if they are sharing that video with someone else, the video might not be there yet. And they have to keep refreshing the page if they want to see if it's there already. So something that could be very useful for that application is this, right? So I could just dispatch an event like using Swoole to the client, and the client will just see a small message right here in the corner, for example, oh, your video is available, and here is the link. So that could be very fast. And the way to do that I already thought about this and I couldn't sell this yet, is if you go on Swoole, I don't have it here. Here. If you go on Swoole's page in their documentation, you'll see some further explanation on what they have. They have all of these features. For example, this protocol, where is it? No, I'm not seeing it here right now. Atomic clock, multiprocessing, MQTT. Yeah, MQTT, for example, is for Internet of Things, for to control devices in your home, for example. But if you want, for example, to communicate with a socket server, for example, because the current application is working there, and we might not want to stop and make that application become offline in order for us to add this feature, right? So we don't need. We just need to use the client, because Swoole, it doesn't offer just the server, but it also has the client. And here it is, HTTP client, and it has other clients as well. If we go on the socket server, WebSocket server, you will see, I don't know if it's right here. Actually, it's because I just opened the server documentation. But I know that it has the client also. Let's see if I can find it right here. Nope. Coding clients. Yeah, I know that it has, but I'm not sure if I will be able to find it right now. But I know that they have like the WebSocket client, they have the HTTP server client. So you can actually, during this procedure of uploading to YouTube, for example, we could do a small connection to the WebSocket server that is hosted in our server and dispatch a message saying, oh, the video is ready, here's the video ID, and the other side does the rest, right? So this is also possible. We don't actually need to dispatch this message directly to the front end or change the bigger scope of the original application right now. So this is something that I wanted to share. Yeah, let's just keep this simple and stop right here. So these are a few thoughts of mine of what we could do with this. We could do way more things. For example, the Swoole also has like stream, so we could use to upload stuff. We could use to process different parts of application in real time. For example, in this video case, for example, if we were working with libraries, I know that libraries for archival purpose, they use a format called DAG. So when you upload a digital asset, it can be an image, it can be a video, they are going to create a few copies of that asset. So they're going to create a copy for long-term preservation, they're going to create a copy for availability, they're going to create a copy, like many copies. So for that process is very expensive when it comes to server. So if we're using Swoole, we wouldn't need a bigger architecture to do all of those steps. We could just dispatch events, having different small Swoole services working, doing what it needs to do according to the message. We don't need to have like a big message bus listening to everything in another server and dispatching and listening and getting acknowledged from the messages, things like that. We can keep it simple if we want, Just a few thoughts of mine. I think I'm out of ideas right now of more things, but yeah, this is my presentation. I hope you enjoyed. And this, I believe, is the new era of PHP. Any questions?
May I see the last slide you had? I want to grab the URL there for the
here.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. I'll check it out sometime soon.
Nice. There's just one detail there that I forgot. I was figuring this out a few moments ago. Uh, so in order to make this work, because I'm not using a MySQL database, you have to create this directory here. Because like those records that those to-do items that we created here, for example, just in case you're going to use, they are actually file systems, as you can see here. I'm just creating files there. And actually, I'm enjoying the idea of creating files, right? I think like sometimes like we use MySQL database just because it's the way we learned, but like I've been seeing a lot of NoSQL databases out there, and what they have been doing is basically just what I did here. They just keep playing stuff without that huge amount of metadata and constraints. They call they call it documents, like MongoDB, for example. You have a document that is actually very flexible. You can also add some constraints here and there, but they are more programmatically. They are not kind of a configuration in your database, you know. So I've been questioning that a lot. If we really need MySQL for everything we do, and this is why I did this using file system. So yeah. Any further question? No. I think
Thank you
that's
very
it.
much.
Nice. You're welcome.